Hello and welcome back to this video series where we're looking at building an e-commerce platform in 25 days using Next, Netlify, and Stripe. In this video, we're going to look at building a checkout page. So this will be the page that we'll go to after we've finished adding things to our cart and we want to actually process the payment. So we have this checkout button, but when we click it, nothing happens. So let's start off by building a new page. And then let's go to our cart component and navigate to this checkout page when we click that button. So our checkout button here is a style component which is rendering out a button tag. So we just need to add an on-click handler to this. And then we're just going to declare this function. And in order to actually route to a different page, we need to bring in Next's router. And then call this use router hook inside our component. Cool, so now that we have a router, we can just push a new route to that router. And that new route is going to be /checkout. So now let's see if that is working. So this has navigated to our new route, but the cart is still open, and that's because the cart is globally accessible across all of our app, and we haven't actually told it to close. We could close it by clicking this X, but we're not going to expect our customers to do that every single time they come to our checkout. So anytime that we click that checkout button, I think it would be good to also close the cart. So we're already bringing in that close cart function so that when we click the X, it will close our cart. And so we can just copy that same function and call it here. Cool, and now when we open our cart and click the checkout, the cart closes as well, which is a much nicer experience. Okay, so now we just have the problem that our checkout looks terrible. And so we're going to have to fix it up with some styling. But this also points out an interesting bug that we probably didn't see in other videos because we had enough content to fill the screen. But you'll see that our background gradient is ending here because this is where our content ends. And so for our gradient background, we need to give it a min height. So up here in our _app.js container, we just need to say min height is going to be 100 viewport height. So this is 100% of the browser's window. And now when we go back, you'll see that gradient's going all the way to the bottom, even though our content stops up here. So that's much better. So the next thing is we have this whole new page to style, but it's probably good to reuse some of our styling from another page. So if we come back to our details page, you'll see that we have this nice kind of white page looking thing. So it would be good to reuse this component across any other pages that we want to build where we might want that layout. So let's start off by moving that out into its own style component because at the moment it is inside this product.js file. So let's start by taking this from here, cutting it out and moving it to our styled components folder. And I'm going to call this one page. And now we need to import page in our product.js file. And now we can use that where we're using container in our actual component. Okay, cool. So let's make sure, nope, that's not working. Styled is not defined. So inside our styled component, we always need to remember to import styled from style components. Awesome, and now that's looking much better. And if we navigate over to our checkout page, we just want to reuse that same component here. And that's looking much better. We have a random semicolon in there, which is here. Awesome, that looks good. So I might start by making this a H2, because we already have a H1 here. And so the hierarchy of kind of importance of our page, this should be a H2. Cool, and I might take that exclamation mark off, and then I'm just going to build out a fallback message for if we don't have any items in our cart. Okay, cool, so that will be the message that our users will see if they don't have any items. So then we want to iterate over the collection of items in our cart and render those out if we have them. So firstly, let's bring in our cart. And then call our hook here in our component. And then here we basically want to say, like if we have items in our cart, so if the length of our cart is greater than 0, then we want to do something. Otherwise, we want to do this. But we can't actually do if statements in JSX, so here in our markup section. And so we need to use what's called a ternary operator. So that's where we do the condition first. So we say cart.length greater than 0. So if that is true, then we want to render like has items, and we'll replace this with our actual cart items. And then we say, or we want to do this other thing. And so that's where we would render this fallback, that they don't appear to have any items in their cart. And then I'll get rid of this section. And then because this whole chunk is JavaScript, we need to wrap it in curly brackets. Okay, so we should now be seeing that other message, which we are not, because import error use cart is not exported from hooks use cart. And you're right, because it's the default export, so we don't need those curly brackets. Cool, so now we're seeing that has items message. So now let's iterate over those items and show them on the page. So we're probably going to want to do something very similar to our cart. So why don't we just go and grab that from there? So from this UL all the way down, we'll probably want our total as well. And we will want some kind of button that we can process the payment with. And then we're going to have to bring across each of these style components. So we're going to need the UL, the item, the total, and the button. And then we'll need to bring in style components. And now that should be rendering again. No, adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in a closing tag. Yes, because... So here we're returning this UL, but then we're also returning this total and this button. So we have 3 elements that are all at the same level. So they're all adjacent siblings. And so what that error is suggesting is that we can wrap this in a fragment. So just one of these elements with nothing in it. And then we need a closing one. And now we should be in business. No, navigate to checkout is not defined. And so this one won't be navigate to checkout anyway. It'll be process payment. But let's define that up here. And then we're just going to console log implement this in a future video. Okay, cool. And so bringing in all of these style components, like we could have moved these up into that style directory and then brought them into both. But since we might want some custom styling on this checkout page, I don't want to kind of tightly couple those two UIs together. Like we might want some different spacing between list items, or we might want a slightly different button. Usually as I'm working through a design, I won't sort of try to make things reusable as much as possible and really lock myself into that. I like to keep it nice and easy to change the design quickly. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. Okay, awesome, that looks nice. And so yeah, as I mentioned before, we might want a little bit more space between each of these items now that we've got more screen real estate on our checkout page. So on our item here, I might just make the margin bottom 1 rem. Nice, that's feeling a little bit better. And I just want to change the text of this checkout to be process payment. Cool, and I've just noticed that this total is a static value of $500, and it nearly caught me out because 480 is pretty close to $500. But yeah, here we want to actually iterate over each of those prices and add them together. So I might do this calculation outside our markup here, just so it's a little bit cleaner. Okay, so I'm going to say let total equal 0. I'm using a let here instead of a const, and that's because we want to keep updating our total. So we're going to iterate over all the items in our cart and keep adding that value to the total. So now we can say cart.for each item. We want to say total plus equals item dot price. Cool, and now we should be able to take our price and move it down here. And again, we're going to want that $sign first, and then because we're accessing a JavaScript value, we're going to use our curly brackets, and then we're going to say total. And 48,000 is not quite right, and this is because we're displaying the amount in cents. So again, we just need to divide this by 100 here. Awesome, that looks much better. Okay, and I just noticed that we have our total here, and that's 260 plus 200 is 460, but we're not taking into account the quantity of either of those. And so over here where we're calculating our total, so let total equal 0, and then we're iterating over each of the items. Rather than just being total plus equals item dot price, it needs to be total plus equals item dot price times item dot quantity. Cool, that looks much more accurate. So you'll see when we open our cart, we've still got that static $500. And so we probably want that logic in our cart as well. And since we're going to need these in both places, it's probably better to move this up to that cart context and just calculate it once, and then anything can use it. So I'm going to cut this from here and head over to our cart context. I'm then going to create a new state variable for our total. And I'm just going to initialize that to 0. And then we basically want this value to be calculated anytime the cart changes. So we already have this use effect here that has a dependency for cart. So after we set the item to local storage, we're just going to paste in that logic. And we've already got total declared as the variable name there. So we're just going to set this to be new total. And then after we've done that calculation, we're just going to set total to be new total. And the last thing we need to do is just add that to that exposed object so that anything using our hook can access it. And now back in our checkout, we can destructure off total when we call use cart, and then nothing else should need to change down here. We're dividing our total by 100 and displaying that $sign. So let's check that that's still working. Cool, that's looking good. So now we just need to update our static value here for $500 to use that same total. So over in our cart component, we just bring in our total where we're calling use cart. And then where we've got $500 here, we're just going to replace this with the same calculation. So the $sign and then total divided by 100. Awesome, that looks much more accurate. We've got $660 there, and we've got $660 here. So our checkout page is looking nice. We need 2 more pages for when we implement Stripe. So we need a success page, which is where the user will go when the payment is successful. And then we need a canceled page. So when the user starts going through the Stripe flow and they decide that they don't want to go ahead with the purchase, they can click cancel, and we need a page for Stripe to forward them to in that case. So the first one we're going to do is the success page. So if we create a new page here for success.js, and so now if we navigate to our success page, cool, so we probably want this to have that same kind of page layout as our checkout. Okay, and we might make this just a little bit more welcoming, so we could say payment successful, and then maybe just a paragraph tag saying thank you for your purchase. One more thing we probably want to add to this page is that when the user is navigated here by Stripe, it means that their payment was successful, so their card was charged. But if we have a look here, these items are still in the cart. So we probably want to empty this cart whenever the user lands on this page. So let's head up to the cart context, and we probably want to create a function here that can clear out the cart. So the first thing we're going to do is just remove anything that we have in local storage for the cart. And then we just want to set the cart to being an empty array. Now we just need to expose this function to anything using this hook. And then in that success page, we want to import that hook. And then we want to call that hook and pull out that clear cart function. And then we just need to decide when we want to call this clear cart. And so we want this to happen as soon as this page is mounted. So as soon as this component is mounted. So that's probably a good use case for useEffect. And then we want to call our clear cart function. So remember, when we call useEffect and pass it an empty dependency array, this will happen once when the component is mounted, but then it won't happen again no matter what changes in our application because we're not telling it to listen to anything in our application. Okay, so if we save that and head back to our payment successful page, you'll see our cart is empty, and that's because this has automatically refreshed. So if we go back and step through that same process, so we add a couple of items to our cart, we see those, we're happy, we head to the checkout, we go and process our payment. And so imagine this has gone off to Stripe land, the user's entered their credit card details, it's processed the transaction, and then it said, cool, this is a success, so I'm going to send the user back to this page. Now, if we open our cart, it should be empty. Awesome, that looks good. Although maybe we want a fallback message in the cart as well, so it doesn't just say total, because that's a little bit weird. So just inside content, underneath that title header, we probably don't want to render out this unordered list or the total or the button if there is nothing in the cart. So if we use our curly brackets here again, we can check whether the cart.length is greater than 0. So this means that we do have items in the cart. So when we do have items in the cart, we want to do all this stuff. But then when we don't have items in the cart, we want to put a paragraph on the screen that just says cart is empty. And we're going to have the same problem that we had earlier where we've now got these 3 different elements that are now adjacent siblings. And so we just need to wrap this in a fragment. Okay, cool. Sorry, that was probably a lot of jumping around. So we have our content, we have our title that says cart, and then we're just checking if the cart length is greater than 0. So if we do have items in the cart, then we want to render out this unordered list and our total and our button to navigate to the checkout. But if that's not the case, so if the cart is empty, then we just want to print out a message saying the cart is empty for the user. Okay, so we're seeing that cart is empty message, but if we come here and add an item to the cart, then we see all of that pops in. And then if we navigate to our success page again, we go back to that empty cart message. Okay, so our last page is just going to be a cancelled page. So when the user goes through the payment flow and then decides that they don't actually want to charge their card. So I'm going to create a new page for cancelled. And then I'm going to import our page component because we know we're going to want to display it within that. So for this page, we're just going to render out payment cancelled as the title, and then we're just going to give them a little bit more information that they have not actually been charged for this, so they feel comfortable continuing looking through the store and finding the things that they really want to purchase. And so now if we head back to our application and close our cart, and if we just head over to the cancelled route, we should see that payment cancelled, you have not been charged. Awesome, so we've created 3 nice consistent pages, one for our checkout, one for our successful payment, and one for our cancelled payment. So we're going to need those 3 pages when we look at implementing Stripe. In the next video, we're going to look at Netlify functions. I'll see you there.